So, so here's the thing that I thought was kind of at least one thing of the many things that I find interesting about us is I'm a mental health specialist, and your background in conflict resolution, I think, is really interesting. You know what I mean? Like the graduate work that you've done in that area, and
Yeah.
just all the time you've spent studying it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that informs on like really, I think it's just going to be two good buds talking about things. But because we both like are into kind of, I don't know, I think we often have kind of fun conversations and they'll naturally kind of head in a meaningful direction. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's what I was thinking I was figuring that I was like, we don't hesitate to just kind of get after things, but we also can have fun like with it. And I think that we're funny guys. And,
at least we
and
enjoy ourselves, right?
yeah, at least people will pick up on that. Nobody else may find us
Make
funny, but
sure make sure at the beginning of every podcast we tell people how funny we are.
yeah.
Yeah.
Just want you all to know that we're hilarious and
If you're not laughing, it's not because we're not funny, it's because you don't get
yeah,
it.
it's just something about you, not us.
Yeah, definitely
Uh,
your problem.
yeah,
Right.
I think that's a good way. I think that's a good way to start it. Um, I think it's also just there's like some fun like history that's there since we've known each other for a long time. Because I was thinking like even like in starting off like that's kind of an interesting place to start with is like how we got to know each other and like where we met each other.
Yeah.
Um,
And that may even really and really kind of lead the conversation in a good way because we met each other, we became really good friends. And then and here's something I wasn't sure about. How much do you want to talk about your own personal experience with trauma? Is it something you feel like getting into, or would you rather just talk about it more, oh, like,
uh,
you know,
I think that I mean I think it'd probably be to the degree that we can be vulnerable. I think that it'll be better.
well, and
You
that's what I'm
know,
thinking is, just in our own, if we're just telling the story of our friendship, we met at Anasazi, became amazing friends for multiple years. And then after you got married, we still stayed in contact for a little bit, but as the trauma really got kind of nasty, we separated
yeah,
and weren't in contact with each other very much. And so and then we got back in contact with each other and so even just in telling the story of our friendship, if we wanted to like focus a little bit today on
yeah.
trauma, uh, I think it would naturally go there if we, you know what I
No,
mean?
yeah, I think so too. I think so too.
Yeah. Anything else that you want to touch base on or just that you're concerned about before we really jump into it?
No, I mean, I don't think so. Um, I think what one of the other things is that as because we know each other well, and we'll be kind of coming at this from different experience and perspective. I think, I don't know. I think that I think we can help each other, like, because I think
Mhm.
that we can, like, ask probing questions about things or like be able to see each other's potential like shortcomings and some things because goodness
Yeah,
knows
no, and
I've
I like that
got
idea of us.
I I know I've got them, and so I think that that would be like I think that that would be interesting.
Well, and I think those are the things that make meaningful conversations when people are being honest and genuine and not, like you said, as much as we're able to be vulnerable, I think it'll add to what we do. And at the end of the day, if we get into something, it can stay between us and we can at the end say, hey, that was too personal for me to put out to the world, and we
Yeah,
can cut it out, you
yeah,
know. And so we can kind of feel free to just talk. And then later or afterwards, if we sit with something we said or something we shared and it feels too personal, we'll
yeah,
just kind of have we have full editing rights for each of us, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think like obviously there's like some I mean I think like even in your like talking about it and asking about it is like you're being sensitive to like that I went through a difficult marriage and divorce, and there was a lot of people impacted by that, and there are potentially people, you know, like it's kind of a weird space for me like in talking about it because I don't like I still have like in the back of my head like almost like some fear that it's like, oh, this is going to get back to her family, you
Right.
know.
And I know
You
you
know,
still care about all those people, right? And
yeah, I
wouldn't
mean,
want, yeah,
yeah, I'm not looking to stir up trouble, but I also feel that like part of it is like I think that with my own life, um the part of the way that I created my own suffering was being overly accommodating and avoiding conflict
yeah,
that I didn't take ownership of my own life or care about my own life or say like it's like
yeah,
there's like I've got a right to take up space in this world with my own life and share my own experience, even like the difficulties of it. And it's I guess like that's part of where I can like feel the oh, there's still some work to do here, because if you're worried about that, like why is that, you know?
yeah. Well, and I can see it both ways. One, that worry can come from like a place of ongoing, like trying to work through the difficult thing that you went through. But I also see this really, really sincere space where you go, I I want to do positive in the world, and part of that is being considerate of the other people in this story.
Yeah.
And
Well, and
yeah,
I almost always, whenever I do talk about it, I try to almost exclusively talk about it from my perspective and my decisions,
yeah, and maybe
which is
yeah,
ultimately the only thing that like that I have control over, and ultimately led to like most of my suffering was my
yeah.
own choices that I was making. And so that's I mean, and that's really the only thing I can do anything about. And so like that's how I try to focus it, but maybe that's just another way of trying to tiptoe around it.
Maybe me and you can make a concerted effort to be aware of if either of us are being insensitive to the other people in this story in a significant way, and do our best to notice that and be careful about that, and
Yeah.
then we'll just do our best, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and there's a part of me that also wants to be like, I want to get to a place where I don't even care, where
Yeah.
it's just like I'm trying to tell the story honestly and just leave it at and just have that be that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you.
So
Well, maybe a place to start. Here's something that, as long as I've known you, I think you've told me this before, but I don't remember it. Uh, what brought you to Anasazi?
yeah, well, I mean, I guess like backing up just because potentially other people are going to listen to
Yeah, you
it,
want to give a
like
little background?
yeah. So to just explain what Anasazi is, so Anasazi is the way that they explained themselves, or that we explained it, was that it was kind of the original in wilderness therapy, originated by Terry Olson and Ezekiel Sanchez. And what basically they had found was that in taking students originally at BYU on these survival treks, which my dad actually had done when he was a student at BYU, that it had like a very
Oh,
positive, yeah, yeah. So it had a really positive impact on students, and so they actually even had uh, students that had gotten in, what's it called when your grades are bad and you're
academic probation,
yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. So when you get on academic probation, you had to go through this wilderness survival class in order to get back into school, because they had found that it had such a positive impact. And so, kind of from that experience, they decided to try it with youth who were struggling, and they're very like, I mean, the term now would be like at risk youth. They were always very careful around that particular term because they tried to avoid labels and things like that. Um, I mean, for me, like I've become much more comfortable with that term, like after working with probably thousands of kids and have sadly gotten like the news of ones that have passed on one way or another. Like you start to get a sense of like that there really is like risk in these kids' lives. So like for me personally, I've become much more comfortable with that term at risk because it actually, I think
They
to a
are
certain
at
degree is
risk.
they are at risk. But anyway, so it's a program. They base it out of Arizona, primarily out of the Tonto National Forest, like out in the Payson area. Um, and so let me think. I haven't actually thought about like how I was attending BYU Hawaii, and I was looking for to do something during the summer, and I'd kind of come to two. I had like kind of two plans. So one of them was to go teach English in China, but I would have actually had to pay for that, which I didn't really have a way of doing. And then I had come across this guy. Man, I'll have to look up his name, but his name was Jay. Um, no, no, no. There was a girl that had gone to Anasazi and come back, and she had mentioned it. I kind of knew her because she dated a friend of mine, and so she had mentioned it. So it kind of got into my head, and then I was talking about it one day, and this guy kind of overheard it, and he was like, "Are you talking about Anasazi?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "That place is my life." And he had
Mm.
gone through as a student what we called young walkers, and so he told me all about it. And he's like, "Look, if you want to go work there, I'll help you get a job. I'll help you get a job there." So he called the I think she was the director, so her name is Reagan. Called her. It was like, "Hey, I've got this friend here. He'll be an excellent trail walker." And so then, as I was sitting on this decision of what I wanted to do, I was not sure. I was not sure, even though the China seemed like kind of difficult, but I like that was kind of what I wanted to do because I was like I wanted to be all about traveling. Um, and then I just woke up one morning with like a very clear impression that I needed to go to Anasazi, and so I talked to my friend Jay, asked him if he could help me get a job there, and so he like arranged it. I interviewed, got the job, and then another friend, a mutual friend of ours from Hawaii, he also got a job there, so we went there together, and that was my friend Ted, or well, our friend Ted. Um, and so that so we went to Anasazi together. They had like this big house where all the trail walkers, that's what we were called, and that was where I met Karl for the first time. He walked in. Karl was sick, and he had this really deep voice, like this really deep raspy voice, and
Yeah,
we
everyone
thought,
thought I was cool because I had such an amazing voice for the first week I was there, and
yeah,
then it went away, and people are like, "Well, I guess we still like him."
yeah, not as cool, but he had like this deep raspy voice, and
I
we
was
joked
just
that you
sick.
no, yeah, you were just sick, but we were like joked that you were like this like blues singer or something because your voice sounded really cool. But that was when I first met Karl because we like all lived in that same house. And I think there was like 21, 22 of us living in that house.
At least.
Because we were on rotations, like only half of the people were there. And then because we worked 8 days on, 6 days off, like we were normally like gone doing something in our weeks off. So that's how I came to work at Anasazi. How about
Yeah,
how about
yeah.
you?
I mean, that was a profound moment in my life because I was 21 years old and really just starting to be like, what do I do? Like, I had no
Mm-hmm.
idea what I was going to do with anything. But growing up, I had always had a lot of friends that they weren't like troubled kids, but a lot of my friends did drugs. A lot of them got in trouble in different ways. And I actually just really like they were my people, right? And but I also at the same time however I was able to navigate that growing up. I had avoided drugs and alcohol in high school, and so I had a lot of friends, but I myself had stayed away from it. And then it started to, you get away with that stuff for a little bit, but you get closer to 18, 19, graduating, and you start to see like, oh, like this causes problems after a little bit of time.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to figure out what to do with life. And I thought maybe I want to work with teenagers. And I talked to some of my friends, and one of them had been a student at Anasazi before. And his brother had been a trail walker there. He was a staff member at Anasazi. And so they said Anasazi, and it's funny because you talked about the guy that you met that said it changed his life, and almost anyone you talk to that's been a part of that program, they talk about it in this way that's not hyperbolic, but it sounds hyperbolic,
Hmm.
like a wild exaggeration of how profound it is, right?
Yeah.
And same thing on my side. Like my friend was like, it's amazing. His brother was like one of the best experiences of my life. And at the time, that friend was about to move to Arizona to live with his brother, who was going to Arizona State University. And I talked to him, and the plan was is that me and my buddy were going to move in with his brother and live with him, and both of us were well. I was going to work Anasazi, but my buddy was gonna move down to Arizona. Anyway, so we set up that plan, and I want to say it's been a minute. It's been about 20 years since we were there,
Yeah.
but I want to say less than 6 months before we were going to move down there, my friend who had struggled with drugs his whole life, and that's why he had been through Anasazi, he overdosed and he passed away. And so instead of it being this casual exploration of maybe I want to work with teenagers, like it was almost like it became a calling,
Yeah.
like
Became real really fast.
yeah, like here I am. I'm supposed to be living with a person who's been through this program, and they were claimed. They were lost in the battle, and so I went into it with just this like intensity to me of like, I guess how important it was or how important it could be, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I got there, and I just, to this day, my best, closest friends in the world are people I met at Anasazi. I couldn't believe the caliber of people that I met there and the world that exposed me to, and the adventure and the fun. And yeah, Brett, you were a big part of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
Yeah, no, I mean, and that's like just kind of going back to even what I was saying, like the at risk part, like it's like once, I mean, we're all mortal. We're all, like the potential, like we could be, claimed at any, like you said, like any day. But like once you do start to get into some of these habits, like it becomes very risky. Like it increases, and it's like, and over the years, like I've had like I don't know how many times where I've had like the phone call or the text message where it's like, hey, did you know? And it's like a student's name. And in
hmm,
my head, I'm always like, oh shit.
yeah,
Because I know like why they're reaching out to me. And
yeah,
they're reaching out with that text is like, do you know this? Like, do you know this kid? Because this kid's not here anymore.
bad news,
Something
yeah.
bad news, something's happened. But no, I mean, it's interesting because it's like there was no, the seriousness of it was very real for you, like going into it. I mean, we were young, like we were in our early
Oh,
20s. We were some wild, wild dudes back then. But it was like, I think that was cool about it was that the work that we were doing is that we were all very serious about it. Like serious in that we took it seriously. It wasn't like that we
Oh,
were just like
the
stone
sincerity of
faced.
it,
Yeah,
though.
there you
We
go, the
definitely
sincerity.
had fun, but nothing ever got in way of that singular goal that what we were doing was important.
Important. Yeah. Yeah.
Nothing ever got so casual that we lost focus of the importance of what we were doing.
Yeah, and I guess just kind of backing up like two other components of like the getting that like of the getting there story. So one was I had a younger brother that got into drug use, and so like
Mm,
I had served in an LDS mission, and he primarily got into drugs when I was gone. And because my parents wanted me to like not worry about it, they didn't tell me about it until like kind of the very until like kind of the very end. I had a brother that my older brother let me know, just like, just so you know, this is going on. And I'm like, what? Like,
oh
how come
wow,
nobody told me this? And I think I was like 4 months from coming home. And so
wow.
so when I came home, he was enrolled in a program in Utah, and we were living in just outside Kansas City. But my parents enrolled him in a drug rehab in Utah called Lifeline.
Mm,
And so when I got home, there was like this mix up on like when I was supposed to start school. So I actually like if I knew what I knew now about universities, particularly BYU Hawaii, I probably would have like challenged like what they basically were like, oh, you didn't send us an acceptance letter, so you have to come in the spring.
mm.
You can't, or not in this, yeah, in the spring you can't start now. And I was like, but okay, you guys, I was accepted. I don't. Anyways, if I would have pushed back, they would have let me in. But I guess
But you didn't know to do
serendipitously,
that
I
at
didn't
that
know to
point.
do that at the time. So when I got home, I had like this whole semester of nothing to do. But I got home and my parents were like, hey Brett, we need you to go to Utah to be with your brother. He's supposed to have like a host parent with him,
Mm,
but he, like they live in Kansas, so they couldn't do that. They're like, could you go out there with him? And so like I was out there for several months as my little brother's host parent as he was going through
yeah.
this drug rehab. And part of that, like my and we stayed with my aunt and uncle. And my aunt, she actually just passed away. Like the aunt who we're staying with, she just passed away like a month ago. So very quiet people, very
Mm.
reserved people, and we were staying with them. And part of his job as a host parent is that he would bring kids that were newer to the program with them. And so we were like at their house, and they're these very quiet, reserved people, and we have like all these kids that are, like two or three of them with us, and I'm like supposed to be their host parent, and we had a great time. Like it was like,
I bet you guys had a blast.
yeah, we had a good time, and I was like, dude, I freaking love these kids, man. They're so cool. Like I'm like, I get that they're in trouble, but like for whatever my role, like I'm just chauffeuring them home and back to the place in the morning and hanging out. Like I had a great time. And
Yeah.
so I had that experience where I saw like family struggle. I saw my parents struggle, like because they were really, they really wanted to help my brother, but they weren't quite sure how to do it. It was a pretty devastating thing for them. Like, I remember when I called them when I was in the Philippines. I called my parents. I remember my dad telling me I've failed as a parent,
Mm.
you know, because this one kid, like, I'm like, Dad, come on. Statistically, there's 8 kids in our family. You got one kid that got in trouble. That doesn't make you a bad parent. That's like still like an 85% or something. Like settle down. It's not over yet. But it was pretty devastating, particularly for my parents.
Well,
My
I
brother
just
was
don't
just,
think parents can. I mean, parents, I don't know, man, to love somebody, you know what it is. You're a parent,
yeah,
to
yeah.
love
No,
somebody
you
like
don't,
that. There's just no room for
you don't
their
want to see
suffering
that.
being okay.
Yeah,
You
not
know what
that
I
kind of
mean?
suffering, like you can tolerate some, but not like where there's like where it's like you start getting into that really risky behavior like that gets scary. So there was that. So I'd had that experience. And so I really liked that. And I liked helping young people. And so that influenced my decision to go there. It was like my own family experience. And then it was interesting because it was like the first day that we were there, they were doing a presentation about like where the program came from. And so Ezekiel, who's one of the founders, is like showing these old photos of this program at BYU. And I'm like watching this and I'm like, I think my dad went through this.
Hmm.
And so I called him afterwards and I'm like, is this like, do you know an Ezekiel Sanchez? Like, did you like, is this the program that you went through? And he's like, yeah, that's it, you know, and it was like down in southern Utah. And anyway, so I'd kind of grown up hearing stories from my dad about this particular program because it kind of changed the course of his life. Because he
Okay.
took it not because he was in academic trouble or anything, but he just took it because he thought it would be
Because
a
he
cool
wanted to go explore the
experience.
wilderness.
Yeah, he thought it'd be a cool experience. And then
Yeah.
because of that, he actually ended up like deciding to join the military, like had his whole career there. And it was from like this, like heavily influenced by this particular experience. So it already impacted my family, like in the prior like generation. And then, my I think how many siblings did I have? I had three siblings that came and worked there as well. So it was
Yeah.
so the impact of that one decision in going there had massive ripple effects. And those three siblings also all found their spouses there as well. So it was,
And that actually does kind of lead to a good question, or one that I have for you. It's been 20 years. Your siblings met their spouses there. Your dad, it formed the direction of his career, right? Or at least to some degree helped point him in that direction. And I'm curious about, like, 20 years after that experience, Brett, what are the parts of it that are still with you or meaningful, or how did it shape you over the long term? I'm curious about that. Like,
I think like major impact that it had that I still try to like keep active is my love of being in the outdoors as just like a source of a place that I enjoy being, and then also like find like I think probably most of the major spiritual experiences that I've had in my life, a lot of those have occurred in the outdoors.
hmm,
Um, so on a personal level, like I've tried to continue that. Now I work, I have kids, and so a lot of how I do that now is I do like ultra trail marathons, and which is like kind of a way to see a lot in like as short a period of time as you can, like on your own two
no
feet.
time, I gotta run.
Yeah, I gotta get through this quick. Um, but I try to do that like every day. Education wise, like I did I pursued school and conflict resolution. I that I kind of figured that that would be a good fit for what I was doing. Like I had when I got back to school after that, I would think I was like a business major or something when I first started. And then I was like, oh, well, I really like learning about people and relationships and struggles. And so I thought like psychology, like but that psychology, like in undergrad, is not really like counseling. It's like studying the brain and setting up
Right.
studies and stuff like that. And so I did that for a little bit, and it didn't go super well. And then I changed it to like international cultural studies with an emphasis on communications, and then went on to pursue graduate studies in conflict resolution in Virginia. Um, so it all was influenced by that, and about I was always curious about how being in nature seemed to help heal people.
Yeah.
Whether it was
Yeah.
nature directly doing that or it was just like the being out of your everyday, like I was always curious about that. So that was like in my undergrad, like my senior project. I remember I wrote this like crazy like 80-page paper, which at that time seemed like a lot until I got to grad school. And it was all basically, it was about anasazi and about the role of nature and its like
Mm, the
positive
healing
impact.
components of that.
Yeah, and even like when I got to grad school, like I would try to like study stuff like that, but it wasn't really, that wasn't really like, even I remember talking to a guy that was he's like one of the premier like environmental conflict resolution people. And so I was like, okay,
Mhm.
this dude will be cool. His last name was, I think, Dukes. He primarily taught at the University of Virginia, but I remember talking to him because primarily all the work that he did was it would be disputes over like land,
Right.
and he'd go in and mediate between groups or do like facilitations and workshops and stuff like that on like what are we going to do with this particular resource. And so I remember talking to him and being like, have you ever like have you ever like thought about it as like the component of nature itself that it could help this conflict? And he's like, no, it's always been the source of conflict. I'm like, isn't there a
Oh,
way? Isn't
interesting. So
there
for him, it had become like the thing to battle over
correct? And to help
instead of,
people through that battle.
yeah,
And that was as close as it got to like kind of what my interest with that were.
yeah. I didn't know that you explored conflict resolution so specifically with nature as like a healing component or a tool for
Yeah, it
that.
was like I had always wanted to understand that, like I had looked at going to do a PhD in environmental anthropology
Mm,
at the University of Washington. Humans' relationship with nature.
yeah.
Like that was like what I that was like what I wanted to study. I think the first summer that I was at Anasazi, I'd read a book called The Idea of Wilderness. And it was all about like the history of human relationship with nature. And I was like, this is freaking cool.
So that's an interesting component that I just didn't ever know that you focused on so much. And one of the things I find interesting about it is I like to think that it's this unique part of me that I find nature so healing, you know, but I don't think it is. I mean, I don't know if it is that for everybody, but it seems to be more than just a me thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I think that it is for everybody. Like, I know that maybe they're just at a stage where it's not like it might not be meaningful to them right now, but it's probably they just haven't had like an experience that opened them up to it. Um, I mean,
Yeah.
even like at Anasazi, like some of these kids that came through there that I don't think had ever been outside before, and would have said that they hated like the outdoors and all of this. Like there was no denying the like the way that it helped open them up. And I think there's a lot of reasons why that was happening, but I like could you have done the same thing like in a building? And I don't think it would have like probably worked or been as
I mean,
impactful.
I tried it. My next job after Anasazi was a residential treatment center for teenage girls. And there was just a hurdle to overcome that I didn't have that tool anymore. One,
Mm-hmm.
inside a residential setting, I had to hold boundaries that I never had to hold in the wilderness. And the amazing thing about letting wilderness set your boundaries is it allows you to be in this place where you can show to a kid, these are all your decisions. You're in charge here. You're in control.
Yeah.
And and if you don't want to listen to me, don't. It's okay. I don't need to go to battle with you for you to listen to me or agree with me or think that I have the answers to life in any way,
Mm-hmm.
shape, or form. But in the residential setting, like there were times when like I had to like set these boundaries And it's interesting because I was even just, I do therapy work. I got a mother and a son that I'm working with right now. And I was sitting there talking to them, and I'm trying to show this kid. I really do believe if you want to get in a battle of wills with a teenager, more than likely you're going to lose. Like
That
if you
guy just
want
way more energy. Try getting in a battle of will with a 3-year-old.
to they whooping on you.
He can, man. Well, I've got a pretty determined kid, man. He's clearly very intelligent and very strong-willed, and yeah, it's a battle of like sometimes it becomes a battle of will, and he frequently wins.
Yeah.
Like even last night, he wanted an applesauce. I was trying to get him to go to bed. You don't need an applesauce. You need an applesauce, Dad. You don't need an applesauce. Just go. We're going to bed. You already ate. I need an applesauce. I need an applesauce. guess who? Guess who won
Guess you
that
got an
one? Yeah,
applesauce.
Soren got an applesauce,
So
and then
that's
he
a
went to
3-year-old, right?
bed. Yeah,
And so I'm working with this teenager, and I'm trying to help him understand that he feels like his mom is too controlling, right?
yeah,
And because of that, they've really gone to war with each other. Uh, and and I'm trying to explain to him that you may think that your mom is doing things to you and is controlling you and is unfair, but I don't think that's true. I think this kid is the author of his own world, and he just doesn't want to accept that he's created the world that he lives in, right? And nature just facilitated that realization so well of, oh, I am the one that's creating the world I live in.
yeah. I
It's not the,
remember.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I just it triggered a story for me. I remember there's uh this kid that was one of my students, and it was my first summer there. But anyways, we were up in Idaho because of these forest fires and stuff, so we had to relocate to Idaho. But we were climbing out of this canyon, and I remember he kicks this rock, and he just loses it on this rock. Stupid, yeah, and grabbed the rock and like threw it down the cliff. He's like yelling and swearing at this rock, right? And I'm like, what are you do? I'm like, what are you doing, man? That rock, man, it made me trip. I hit my toe, it hurt. Like I'm like, that rock has been sitting there for thousands, if not millions of years. It didn't do anything to you.
The rock was being a rock.
The rock was being a rock. It didn't do anything. It doesn't have anything against you.
And
It
even,
didn't like jump up and like grab your foot like you kicked it. So then the
right,
question is
right.
like so
Who's
all that
making me miserable?
yeah, that was the question. Is then like so where this anger and frustration and like if we're gonna talk about whose fault it is, it's clearly only yours. That
Right.
rock is not against you.
Well, and what's
And I
fantastic,
and he was like, oh. And so you see like a lot of the storms that we create, like you said with this kid is like this is the world of his decisions, but we like to give away our responsibility of it to others.
right? Well, I mean, to me, one of my most favorite subjects, simply put, justification and how humans navigate justification. And what I really like about that rock story is it shows the absurdity of it. And it seems easier to blame others for our experience when it's in a relationship where both people are probably making
Yeah,
mistakes,
yeah.
right?
It's much
But
easier than a rock. But
while
the
we
rock makes it
say,
obvious.
right, the rock says, like, dude, what are you doing, right?
Yeah.
But while we say the rock is being a rock, with my patient that I'm working with, I feel like I could tell him, your mom's just being a mom, and
Mm-hmm.
you're still creating the world you live in. You are the one in control. I told him that. I says, you are the one in control. Whatever you want to do is what's going to happen. Now, that doesn't mean you can do whatever you want and have a mom that's not being a mom, or a
Yeah.
rock that's not being a rock.
You're not free of consequence.
No, but he is the author of his world.
Mm-hmm.
And if he doesn't like it, if he doesn't like the interactions he has with his mom, he really is the one that's empowered to change that. But it's so easy, so much easier if we can say the way I feel is not my fault. And that's, I don't know, man. I loved that rock story. That
But
was
it's
fantastic.
yeah, but it's like a weird one, right? Because it's like as long as it's somebody else's fault and your emotional state is dependent on the treatment of that other person, whether it
Mm-hmm.
be good or wrong. I mean, once you really start to look at it logically and try to break that down, then it means, well, that other person has control. They have
Yeah.
control over your emotional state. They have control over your well-being. Their treatment directly determines that. And once you really look at the logic of that, you're like, oh, well, that's scary.
Yeah.
I don't want to go down that road. But that is like so frequently, like, I mean, I get into this, like with my wife, like where it's like she'll do something like yesterday she was up. We have three dogs, and we have one in particular that jumps on the back door and it gets all muddy. And she was frustrated. And part of the understanding is that I'm supposed to take care of the yard, the outside, the
Mm-hmm.
dogs, right? And so she
One of
was
your
running
responsibilities.
my responsibilities, right? Understood. No question about it. So she's frustrated. I want to get rid of these dogs. They're making a mess.
Mm.
And so I don't say anything, but in my head, I'm just sitting there grumbling, like, well, that's not like, oh, how could she be talking about getting rid of the dogs? Like they're family members, how dare she, like, and all this stuff. And I'm making up this thing. And it's like, I was the one that wasn't following through on my commitments, but somehow I'd become the
Yeah.
victim of my wife getting upset that like, and I hadn't cleaned this door. I mean, I don't think since I put the security door up. So, I mean, it was
Mm-hmm.
filthy,
Yeah.
like there's other, like we had all these neighborhood kids were over and it's like, she wants the backyard over there jumping on the trampoline, but this area, like, I mean, our backyard doesn't look nice because we have these dogs that tear it up. It's my responsibility. But something when she brings it up, all of a sudden, like I'm like, oh, how dare she?
Right. Right. You always knew it was, but when it came out in a way that, I
Yeah.
don't know, frustrating or
Yeah,
maybe
I mean,
challenging in a
yeah,
way.
and even to bring it to an Anasazi story, I had like, I mean, and this is a whole nother story, maybe for another day because it's long, but I was doing what we called backup. So it's basically you were like kind of like the manager of all the different, like, so they'd have all these different groups and you were kind of managing and making sure they didn't run into everyone say. So my first week doing that, which I only did twice, um, but every single group had like an emergency,
Hmm.
like everything that could go wrong was going wrong, like legit, like within like 2 hours of starting this. And I hadn't been trained, like they just put me out there and were like, you've been here a while, you can figure this out. Everything's going wrong, including there was like this kid that had just got there. Apparently he was like involved with some drug cartel in Florida, and he needed to get back to Florida because his parents had like, an escort service picked him up and brought him out there. He had no idea. Some
Yeah.
This is his story, was that there was like some big drug dealer guy and he had his money and he had to go get it or there was going to be consequences.
Hmm.
So he knows that I have this vehicle out there, so he's trying to find me, and he's going to try to steal. He's going to try to steal my vehicle.
Okay.
So everything's going wrong, and then this one particular kid, in fact, he had made it to a road and was throwing rocks at cars, trying to make them crash so that he could hijack their cars.
Good gracious. This kid is
Yeah,
going for it.
yeah, he's going for it, right? And they're like, he's trying to find you, Brett. He's going to steal the vehicle. Don't let him see you, right? It's like everything's going wrong. And I'm just like, oh, what? This is terrible. Like, because most of the time I'd hear these stories of people who are doing like the backup position, and they're just reading books and People are calling in. Oh, everything cool? Yeah, everything's cool. All right, good. We'll talk to you
You thought you
tomorrow.
had a paid vacation.
Yeah, I thought I had a paid vacation. I had like 3 books I was gonna read. No, nothing. I didn't sleep for like 3 nights straight, like just
Wow.
emergency after emergency. But anyway, so there's this moment where it's like I know that he's about to run into me, so I have to like I dip down off on this random Forest Service road, and I'm like in all these bushes and stuff. And in this brief moment, I guess like backing up before that, like I'd called like the office and was like, this is going on, this is going, this is going on. And the guy that was like supporting me was like, he's like, yeah, it sounds like you got a crazy week. And he's like laughing though. And I'm like, I'm thinking some swear words. Like, I can't believe he's laughing about this. But then he like turned serious and he was like, Brett, can you handle this? Like, we know that you've never done this before, but can you handle this? Because if you can't, we'll pull you out and we'll send somebody else in.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're not gonna pull me out. Like, I'm not like some loser.
Yeah.
This is what I'm thinking. I'm like, I can do this. I'm just pissed, like it wasn't supposed to go this way. Like, I was supposed to be having a
I have
relaxing
books
week.
to read.
I have books to read, man. But anyway, so for this brief moment, I pull off this road and I'm like hiding from this kid who's trying to carjack me. And I remember I'm looking around and there's all these mountains. And I remember thinking, and this is legit, I'm like, these fucking mountains.
Yeah.
I'm like, they're just sitting there. I have complete chaos. All these people, like people could die based off of the decisions that I make, like right now. And these mountains are just sitting here and they don't even care. And right. And I'm like cursing the mountains.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you start to realize, oh, that's a stupid thing to do. And I had the following thought, like after that was like, these mountains have been sitting here doing the exact same thing for millions of years. They've been through Arizona, like summers. They've gone through snow. They've gone through everything imaginable, and they've never moved, and they've never felt, and they've never cared, and they don't care what's going on right now. Everything could go wrong, and these mountains are still going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there looking at those mountains, and I'm like, okay, stop feeling sorry for yourself. And there's people that are out there that are depending on you to help them out of these situations. So quit worrying about like yourself and how this isn't fair, that you don't know, like, because there's total victim mentality. Oh, this isn't fair. Like, I don't even know how to handle these. And it's like, handle these situations. It's very clear.
Yeah.
And then quite miraculously, like it's like every situation turned around.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Including the kid that goes out carjacking. We brought in
because you got carjacked and that kid went back to Florida and that was the end of that story.
No, we dropped Brady Nichols. I think you know Brady, kind of a big guy. He's like a Air Force like SARS instructor
Brady
now.
did a season of Alone.
Yeah. So this guy's legit, and he's kind of a big guy. And I mean,
also maybe one of the silliest, funniest people.
Yeah, just hilarious. Yeah. So he's like, anyway, just to complete that part of the story, they brought him out to be with that kid. And they brought out a second vehicle, like another person to back up to help, because there's so many emergencies I couldn't address them all. So they brought out our friend Devin. There's a very deep voice of Devin.
Who did have a deep voice, not a pretend.
Yeah, so they were
like
so yeah, exactly. So they're concerned about him getting like the car getting jacked. so Brady's like, all right, here's what, like, they could see him coming up. And so Brady's like, all right, he has his pack on, and he had like these buckskin pants that he had made, and he's a big guy, and he's like, all right, I'm just going to hop on the back bumper. And he's like hanging on the back of the Suburban that we have. And we were really big in you'll probably remember this, but we were all really big into Last of the Mohicans. And there's like the soundtrack. So Brady's on the back and he's riding on the back of this bumper, and just like basically it's just like the car just slows down enough for Brady to hop off, and then just takes off. So the guy, he's not able to carjack him. And this big, huge dude like just runs up to him, and he's like, "Hey man, I'm Brady." And he's like, "Look, this is what's going to happen." He's like, "You've made it to the road. You're about 20 miles from town that way. He's like, as soon as you hit the pavement, I'm calling the sheriff. He's going to handcuff you and take you right back where we came from. How do you want to handle this?
Yeah, what do you want to do?
Yeah. And so, anyways, talking to the kid afterwards, because he ended up being a pretty cool kid. Apparently, the
They
story
always
about
were.
yeah, they're always cool. Apparently, the story about being in the drug cartel wasn't exactly true either, but that's what he was telling us.
A good story.
A good story, right? Because we're like, oh, dang, man, these freaking drug cartel. We don't want the cartel to come out here to try to find him to get their drugs and money. But anyways, it's just like talking to him afterwards. He's like, as soon as I saw Brady hop off that truck with those pants, he's like, I knew I was done, and I just gave up right then and there.
Super funny. Super funny. Dude, so once again, we got like this theme that keeps popping up. The rocks being a rock, the
The
mountains
mountains
being a
being a
mountain,
mountain.
moms being a mom. But it does make me think. I was sitting there as you were talking, other than laughing and enjoying that story, I was just thinking about, okay, so what does that mean for me to be me? If the mountain's just being a mountain and that brings it peace and it doesn't have malice towards things around it and it does what it's supposed to do. And it made me think about this Chris Wallace Sr. He was the clinical director when we were there.
Yeah.
And one time he was talking to me and he asked me, he says, Karl, what's your purpose? Right.
A
And I
very
was like,
Chris Wallace thing to say.
yeah, yeah. And I felt that exact way when he said it. I said, I don't know, Chris. Why don't you shower wisdom on me instead of asking me to like be smart on the moment? Because I'm not, you know.
Yeah,
Anyway, it was just funny because I was like, I don't know, but please tell me. But he said something that I mean, this one stuck with me. He goes, Karl, your purpose is to participate. And I thought about that. It's such a fascinating statement because there will be moments in your life when participating means being the best in the room, smartest guy in the room, most
yeah.
capable, most knowledgeable. And participating in that moment means, hey, I have a skill set, I have something to offer here, and I'm going to offer it. And you're going to be awesome. You're going to be the smart guy that knows the answers, and it's going to be cool, right? Sometimes you're the slowest guy in the room. Everyone in there is smarter than you or knows more about the subject. Or, as I know when I hang out with you guys hiking or backpacking, I'm going to be the least athletic one in the group, right? And in those moments, life isn't about being smart, pretty, funny. It's just about participating. So sometimes participating means, hey, I don't know this very well. Will you teach me? Hey, I'm not very good at this. Will you help me? And sometimes it means, I have something to offer. Does anyone need help? I'm here to participate. Anyway, with our rock being a rock, mountain being a mountain theme,
Mm-hmm.
I've just always loved, and if I try to wrap my head around what it means to just be me, just be who
To
you are.
participate. Yeah.
I loved that. It was something that was really meaningful for me that you made me think of.
Yeah, no, that's good, man. It makes me think of like the song lyrics from like the Avett Brothers where like you got to show up if you want to be seen.
Mm, yeah.
Like if you want to be seen, you got to show up. But I think like even for me, like with this podcast, like which for me, like it's worth it if all it is just a conversation, like an ongoing conversation between me and you.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
like that's valuable to me, and that's good enough. But I mean, a part of it is I was like thinking about it was uh like just try to show up and put something into the world, like try to something positive like into the world that your thoughts and like your voice um
Yeah.
you know
Participate.
participate take up space in this world. Like it's like,
Yeah.
do you know, like, are you the best at conflict resolution? No, like I'm not. Like it, like I mean, that's part of like when we talked about is like, do I have that background? Yes. I also am terrible at conflict, which
Yeah.
also means that I'm good at telling stories because I'm good at like failing at it.
Yeah.
But then it's also just like, okay, but you're a person and you have experiences and thoughts, and um I've found that I can communicate empathetically and be
Well,
helpful to others. And so it's like, why not, like, why not try to have like a vulnerable conversation with your with your good friend Karl, and
yeah.
see what happens with it.
Yeah. I mean, it makes me think of, okay, so I heard this quote. I never read it. I've tried to find it since, and I can't
Class
find it.
classic Karl.
Yeah. So I'm making stuff up. Okay.
Okay, yeah, but it's
But
still
when it
good
was
though,
told to me,
regardless of the source.
yeah, when it was told to me, I want to say somebody told me it was like Tolkien, which makes sense because of the nature of his writing. But he said something to the effect of the greatest epic ever written is that of the average everyday man.
Mm.
And as I'm sitting here listening to you talk, I'm just thinking about like, and it works better focused towards me, but I think I'm simultaneously nothing special. Like I'm not smarter, more important. Like I'm just a guy, right? And simultaneously, I just think every last human on earth, if you could really understand them, they are just astounding and they have a story to tell and
Mm-hmm.
struggles and knowledge gained and things they've overcome. And that, it was just a thought that came to my head as you were talking that like we have these conversations all the time, and all we're doing is adding the recording aspect to it and seeing if maybe other people would want to interact with them and enjoy them as much as we do.
Yeah,
And are we special? No. In the
but yes, at the same time.
But yes, right? Special in the way that everybody's special, which is profound if you ask me.
Yeah, yeah,
And the only thing is can we make an offering that's sincere so that you can see maybe a glimpse of what's special about all humanity shown through us, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's worthwhile. I do have so we gotta back up here though, because in kind of I gotta return the question back to you, that you talked about like the impact that what the Anasazi had on me going forward into my life. And so I guess returning that back to you, like, I mean, we could
Well,
go off on talking about like the like victimization and things like that, but just like to kind of return it back to you because I shared my side of it and I just want to hear yours.
yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, so I mean, here we are 20 years later. I think this part will pull some emotion out of me if I'm not careful. Man, I think the big one is the actual relationships, right? Yeah, the actual relationships were obviously the biggest part. Uh, I don't know what it was about that place or doing that thing. I think part of it's the nature, part of it's the struggle. I know it's egotistical, but I swear it was a special group of people.
I think it was too.
Like
Because
I've been back
I
to,
went back there numerous times, and I think like those first two summers, and I felt like kind of particularly the first one,
yeah,
like it was special. Like it was like the people that were there was just this right mix of like crazy, but like wicked smart and like just
Deep
good
thinking,
people. Like,
serious, sincere people. Yeah.
but wild though too,
Oh,
man. Like
dude.
we were into some like I mean, nobody was doing drugs or anything crazy, but we were going on these epic road trips and just doing wild stuff, man. Like
They were fun
it was
people.
fun. It was a good time.
Yeah.
Like that's a way to be, in your early 20s. I talk to
Yeah.
people where it's like partying is like what they did. And it's like, okay, I could see like that could maybe be fun. It doesn't resonate with me, but
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, we were freaking wild.
Yeah. That was
In the good
our
sense of the word.
version because we weren't into drugs or that kind of partying. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
our version of like going on a bender.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I
But
mean, I'm with you though on the relationships thing because
yeah.
it's like my close friends, like I'm sure we'll probably not get into it this time, but like just to, I guess, just to kind of say, like the friends that I had from them, I ended up, I was married before for like 13 years. It was a problematic relationship. And I remember like when I had left and I was living in our friend Richard's garage and he was from
Hmm.
that period of time as well. It took me in, like let me live with his family, and I went through a very hard divorce. And like a big size of a big amount of several of the people that were from that period of time came down to go canyoneering.
Yeah.
And there was like this moment, it was like it's wild, man. Like I remember the first time I saw you, I hadn't seen you in years. And it's like there was like no words. We just cried. That was a crazy moment.
It was crazy because I knew and had known for years that you were suffering. And I think what was wild about it is I think I knew that you needed something in that moment. And all I really had to give was some love, you know? But also, I think it was just, I think part of it was just hurting that you were hurting, but then so happy that I got to be a part of it in any way, like helping you come back, helping you
Yeah.
get through that, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think about this a lot. Like if you love somebody and they're hurting and there's nothing you can do about it, right? It's I can't think of a more, I guess painful is the word coming to my mind, like a more painful, like, and I think it just kind of freezes you a little bit and you just don't know what to do and you just it's like carrying a wound, you know?
Yeah.
And I think I was just so overwhelmed with this is my friend Brett, and he's been struggling, and he's in a place where we can get him.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people struggle in such a profound way. You start to question, like, oh no, like like what if they're lost forever?
Yeah.
And I think there was definitely a few years there where I was like, because we hadn't seen each other in years, but we had seen each other like once or twice
Yeah.
through all that. And I remember, dude, you're one of my favorite people on earth. You're just you're just brightness for me. And I remember like I saw you a couple times and I'd be like, dude, the light's off. The
Yeah,
light's
I mean,
off
it
in that
was.
soul. You know what I mean? And so I think I sat for a few years. And even if I think about it now, I know you don't feel this way, but even if I think about it now, I'm like, man, I should have reached out more. I should have tried harder to be there for him.
I
But
mean,
I
I
was
don't
just
think.
happy.
Yeah, no, keep going.
I was just happy that it's like you might lose somebody and then you go, wait a minute, we might have them. Go get them.
Yeah,
I think that's how I felt in that moment. I think that's why it just came out like just emotional thunder.
yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, that's how I experienced it. There wasn't any words, like to be said in that particular moment, And it's like I remember we got in, we got in like Richard's car, and there's these other guys from like from Anasazi at that time, and our friend Kyle. And I just remember being like, and I hadn't seen Kyle the entire time, so I hadn't seen
Yeah.
Kyle in, I don't know, 13, 14 years at that point. And he's just like, so what happened? Where he been? And I think I just talked for like 3 hours or something
Or more.
straight.
I
Yeah, or
remember you
more.
just
Just
like you
everybody like
just
list.
told your story from like and anyway, and we were just raptured. That was my experience.
Yeah, yeah. It was crazy because it was like, I think when you're stuck in a relationship like mine, or that I was in, you become really guarded about what you say, and you never feel quite free to say. But it was like I was kind of able to say what my experience was, probably for
Yeah.
the first time in like, I don't know, maybe since before. I
Yeah. I
mean, I
mean,
talked to some other people about it at that point, but it was different because it was like, because that period of time was so important and formative to who I was, and ultimately that was, um, because of the experience, but more importantly because of the relationships, like you were saying, that were formed then. There was like it was like a collapsing of time,
mm,
like where it was like there was a period of time where I was strong.
mm,
There's a period of time where I was courageous, and a lot of that was gone from me. But it like kind of collapsed time because I was with people where it was safe. I just kind of reconnected with like that part, and a lot of who I think of myself as who I am, like, was created or found or experienced during that period of time.
well,
In the relationships that I, you know,
I think
had.
that's one thing that when I saw you, we had seen each other a few times and we had talked and we've always been like I've always just loved you to death, right? But what was interesting is that was the first time we were going to spend time with each other in a significant way in many years.
Yeah.
And it had been many years and nothing was gone. Nothing
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
friendship, in the love, in the, like, and in my esteem of you. As you were telling that, like, you say, like, I had been courageous once and I had been strong once and I had lost that. And I'm curious if you felt this, but you were still that to me. You know what I mean? Like in that moment, like I like your phrasing of time collapsing because it was
Yeah.
like went on to Sazi, I knew you best friends,
Yeah.
and then you leave and have this really traumatic, prolonged traumatic experience, and then here we are on the back end of that, and that like you were the same person to me, and you always have been. Like whether you're struggling, and truthfully, like you may have experienced that relationship, that really difficult relationship, as a failure or as a weakness, like I was strong once, right?
Yeah.
But I like everything about that story was a manifestation of your strength. Because the way I experienced that story after you talked for 3 hours and just laid the whole last decade of your life out there. uh I think half the reason you suffered is because you had a set of values and morals that you were so committed to, that there was a blindness in there in the right way to do this, but nonetheless, you were committed to trying to work that relationship out, trying to do the right thing, trying to help this person that you were married to who had a lot of trauma of her own. In
A
fact,
lot.
it was the
Yeah.
source of all the suffering. I think that she had been hurt and didn't know how to deal with the hurt she had experienced. And I don't know, you know what I mean? But I saw, like, it's just interesting to me.
Yeah. I
You've
mean, I
always been the
remember.
same person to me.
Yeah. I mean, I remember like, so Richard, who, like, our friend who was like very involved in my, like, getting me out of getting through the divorce, including like attending like some mediations where we're trying to like resolve like some of the stuff. So he was very like more so than like a friend, like talking about above and beyond the call of duty. Like that was like crazy. But anyways, I just remember coming out of one of these mediations and him being like, I cannot believe that you made it 13 years in that. He's like, that may be the greatest feat of human endurance I've ever encountered. He's like, don't get me wrong, like it was like misguided, but still the fact that you were in that for 13 years, he's like, it is mind blowing to me. I do not know how you did
Yeah, I I uh
it.
I agree. I don't think it was right of you to stay in that relationship as long as you did, but I do think that you did it trying to pursue morals and values that you hold in very high regard. And I agree. It was a
Yeah, I mean, it's like C.S. Lewis says, like our values when they become, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but it's like all like evil starts from like like some type of moral that's gone wrong. Like, so
I've even
if you're into perseverance, like that's a good thing until you're in something you shouldn't be persevering. Then it should be like you should get out, be like wise enough to realize, hey, this isn't good. This isn't good for you. This isn't good for her. You should probably get out.
yeah, I feel like
Um,
often the pitfalls in human life are positive characteristics pointed in the wrong direction. And I even think of
yeah,
like the biblical character Paul, originally Saul. I always thought of the way, like when you're kind of learning about like some of those biblical characters, the way that story was always told to me is that Saul was a real dirtbag that did evil things and was a kind of a garbage human being. And then he saw the light and started to
yeah,
like do good in the world. But I don't think that's true. I think the truth is that Paul was always a highly morally driven man. And when, as Saul, he thought that executing the law and persecuting those that break the law, and he thought that that was justice and that that was the right way to be in the world.
yeah,
And he was still that same person. It's just that he realized, oh no, I've taken all my desire to be good, all my desire to be like a moral person and to do what I think is right and to like seek justice. And I've been pointing it in the wrong direction. And I've been hurting the people that needed my help the most. And I bet that was earth shattering. That concept of a human in that moment of
yeah,
thinking they had devoted their life to the right thing and realizing that they had a good intent and a bad target.
yeah.
You know, anyway, I think I don't know, to me it's similar.
Like all this white noise.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I've got pretty like rudimentary IT in my office, but it's the space I
Yeah,
have. So anyway, I'm sure it's all on my end. Anyway, uh So yeah, like that theme of Saul and you of I think that's actually most often what's getting humans in trouble is the desire to be good pursued in the wrong way.
Yeah.
It's not the evil in people that causes trouble. In fact, I kind of don't believe in the evil in people. I think that everybody really wants to be good. We're just not that good at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an interesting thing how we get lost in our best efforts, you
Yeah.
know? But yeah. Anyway, man.
All right. Wait, but Carl, going back, we still haven't answered the influence of Anasazi on
Yeah, yeah,
your
yeah.
life. So going back from that,
Yeah, please.
going back to that.
So yeah, relationships was a big one. The other thing that I think was big for me, uh, I I I think it's part of why. I mean, you guys, you've seen a lot of emotion from me as I talk about friends and as I talk about relationships. And I think it's because a big part of my life, I just was trying to figure myself out and it was messy. And I think there was a lot of spaces, maybe even very, very important relationships where I didn't feel like I fit in, or I didn't feel seen, or I didn't know what to do with the things that were hard in my life. And I think the biggest one was growing up, my relationship with my dad. Uh, like it was, it was hard. And I think it was because that relationship was important to me, but we kind of butted up against each other, And while I didn't like that, I simultaneously was like learning all my skill set for like connecting with others, navigating the world from from this person in my life, from my dad, who was on his own journey and struggling in his own way that I was really blind to. I really struggled to understand how life was hard for him, right? And then simultaneously, I'm learning these skill sets for like navigating the world from this person who's struggling. And one of the ways that played out is I was a horrific high school student. My claim to fame, I've never met anybody like graduated high school on time, because I did graduate on time, but I've never met anyone that graduated high school on time with a lower cumulative GPA than me. Like never. I graduated high school with a 1.6 GPA. And I would go to classes and I wouldn't do the work and I wouldn't show up. I wouldn't go to classes. And then I would go to these poor teachers and I would just manipulate and brutalize them into giving me a D minus. You know what I mean? And I think that I wasn't, I think once again, it was always in me to want to be good, but a lot of things got in the way of that. And I went
Uh,
to Anasazi and I had experienced a lot of, I mean, failure literally. Like I remember my worst grade, at the end of the semester
mhm.
was 6 F's and a D minus, right? I had experienced failure, right?
It's quite the accomplishment there.
Yeah, right. And to go through life kind of learn like how do you adapt to tolerate the feeling that you're not good or not good at things or can't accomplish things. And I had built a whole ego around that. And when we got to Anasazi, we got exposed to a body of thought, uh, that we call the Arbinger Institute, right? And it just gave me this repeated exposure to a different way to be in the world, a different way to connect with people. We talk about these kids thinking that everyone else is causing their problems. I did that too, and I still do that today, but I'm getting better at it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But at that point in my life, I wielded like victimhood like a broadsword, you know, and my life was hard because of what other people did to me, not because of how I what I chose and how I chose to see others. And so I think that was one of the big things for me was was that it changed the way that I navigated relationships and to change the way that I found power. Right. I liked the way I've always used that phrasing, and you'd used it earlier too. That concept of you can be a victim, which means it's not your fault, you're excused, you're justified, which is, oh my gosh, it's a wonderful feeling if it's not your fault and all you want to do is be a good person, and you can say, well, it's not my fault that I'm bad, right? I understand the impulse to do that. I still do it to this day. uh but the problem is now you're a powerless person. if
Yeah.
if everything in your life that's hard is hard because of what other people do, then you have no control over things in your life. And this taught me that by owning my own flaws and learning to sit with them in a healthy way, that I could have really meaningful relationships, that I could take past traumas in my life, my childhood with my dad. I it was little t trauma. I wasn't abused. I wasn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It affected me profoundly. It was very hard for me, right? And those concepts, those principles that we learned and got to practice over and over on the trail taught me how to forgive my father. It taught me how to take ownership of my own experience, that it's in my power. I get to create whatever world I want. And I can do that because I'm not giving my power away to victimization, to those kind of things. And yeah, that's been, you know, that never got put down. I've since Anasazi, I've read dozens of books. And I even, I became a nurse and I went on, and for a minute, I was thinking of being a nurse anesthetist and just doing anesthesiology, right? And at some point I was like, I think that's going to be a dry, miserable experience. And so I reshifted back towards the therapeutic world, to what I do now as a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and continuing to engage with people in this thing that was so meaningful for me, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the things that are still there and how it's shaped me over the years.
So I got a few different parts of that to follow up on. So one is just pointing out that you went from being get a 1.6 GPA to turning that around and getting, like a doctorate in nursing.
Yeah.
Like that's like that's awesome.
Yeah, it makes me laugh every day. Just so I yeah. And
Yeah.
it's funny too, because I still can't take it serious. I don't think I've accomplished a lot. I just don't think it's much of an accomplishment to get a doctorate.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
And then the other, like, so then the other thing, but it still takes work,
Yeah,
and
right. Yeah, I
somebody
had to
that
figure out how to do
that
that.
probably you probably didn't use the same tricks that you used in high school to
I
pull that
couldn't have.
off. Yeah.
I did the bare minimum and then browbeat people into giving me what I wanted, and eventually people don't like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It can only work so long. Imagine by the time you get to graduate school that doesn't
people
work.
people will put up with that from a 17-year-old. Try it as a
From
28-year-old. You know what I mean?
yeah, then there's like, this is what.
Yeah.
Um, And so then the other is, and this is just because I kind of know, but like, where did the idea to become a nurse like initially come from?
I mean, that was familial. It really was. It wasn't like, you pointed out, like I graduated a doctorate degree. I had a good GPA. My 1.6 turned into like a 3.8 or something, right?
Yeah.
And that was not a quick process, right? And so I'm still trying to figure out what to do and how to build a life for myself. Well, I come from a family of nurses. Was my mom was a labor and delivery nurse for over 20 years, 25 years. And growing up watching her, she has kids that aren't related to her at all, that are named after her because she saved their lives. A she did a parking lot delivery of a baby with the umbilical cord wrapped around the head multiple times. I've
Wow.
already telling this story because I hold my mom in really high esteem.
Yeah, yeah.
Black and blue baby, like like anoxic, like not enough oxygen. The baby's turned purple because it has not enough oxygen. Running from the parking lot in the hospital, doing chest compressions. So my mom had done it, and I looked up to her a lot. And then I had two older brothers, and older brothers are interesting. As a little brother, they're just always bigger than life. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And both my brothers went into nursing, and it was just those guys did it. In fact, part of the reason I thought it was okay to fail my way through high school is because both my brothers did. And then when they graduated, just barely, the same way I just barely graduated, they said, Carl, you can goof off in high school. It doesn't matter, but college matters. And so, okay, they said that. And it was little more than that. I heard them say that a couple times, and I go, okay, I got it. College matters. And so when I went to college, I was like, well, I got to get good grades. And so I tried in college. And then what do I want to do? Well, my brothers went into nursing. My mom's a nurse. I got an uncle that's a nurse, a bunch of cousins. It's just, we got like 10 nurses in my family. Anyway, so it was just the easiest thing to do because the people that went before me did it. And I made it easier for me to figure that path out.
Yeah.
And then luckily, once I became a nurse, there was a path to keep going and get back into the therapeutic worlds. And being a nurse, I always liked it. I always found it rewarding, but I never wanted to do it for 40 years. And then as soon as I got into grad school, man, there was a shift in my state of being that was profound because I was engaged in something that I cared about, that fit my skill set a little bit. And ever since then, the last 5, 6 years of my life, which is when I went back to grad school, right? The last 5 or 6 years of my life, just this massive shift towards just happiness and contentment because I was engaged in something that I was excited about and that I cared about. And so, yeah, I don't know, that's kind of my in a can, my journey with nursing and my career. And it did
So
all start with Anasazi, yeah.
yeah, so something that's interesting. So I didn't know that your brothers were nursing, and I didn't know that your mom was. I thought like she worked in your dad's business. Like at least
Mm-mm.
that was what I thought, like that she was
Yeah,
like helping to run that. So I didn't realize that. So
she
I
did that too.
she did that too. Okay. So our first summer when we were at Anasazi, they offered us a class to be wilderness first responders. And so You kind of know where this story's going already. But I remember observing you in this class, and I could see that you were taking it very seriously. And you
I'm only laughing because you've told me multiple times you were not.
no, I was like, they were like, hey, you can take this free class, and kind of everybody was. So I signed up. I signed up for it and took this class, and because primarily we worked 8 days on and then had 6 days off, and normally on those 6 days we were going on some type of cool road trip. But on this particular week, we were staying home and taking a class.
Yeah, yeah.
And to me, to me, it felt like I was banging my head against the wall. And there was a few people in that class that I could see. I'm like, they're really into this. And I'm like, I do not get this. Like, how could this be? How is this interesting? Like, remember, like, I'm like, I get it. It's important. To this day, I'm actually grateful because it's like, even though, like, I think I failed the test, pretty sure, but there's still things that I know, like, that I learned from that class, even though I was like kind of resisting being there. But I do remember you taking that class and being like really like focused and into it.
It's really funny the way you tell that. And I've heard you tell it before, but that time you're like, normally we went and played and did fun things in our off week. And it was so cumbersome and grating to your soul that we didn't play, that we ended up leaving and driving to Nogales at 2 or 4 in the morning because you're
That's
like,
true.
I can't handle this class anymore. Let's get
That's
out of
true.
here. And we drove to
That's,
Nogales with nothing to do. Nothing.
yeah. We didn't even know when the border opened. we we didn't even know that the border was closed, and then we showed up and apparently it was closed. And then we
Ask,
parked somewhere we weren't supposed to and ended up swarmed by border patrol because they thought we were drug dealers.
yeah.
We're like, no, it's just some
Oh,
bored
dude.
20 year olds, and this one talked the other one into driving to Mexico.
Dude, I love
And
it. It's like
we can at least do something cool that week.
it put you in such a panic state to have to sit in a class in your off week that we had to drive to Nogales at 2 in the morning.
Oh,
Oh
that's a good
shoot.
that was a good time.
What do you think, man? Do you think that's a good place to cut it for now? And then
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
maybe
so.
we can circle back. There's a lot of things in there that I think we could kind of expand on. I'd love to come back and talk to you more about that journey of your marriage and the traumatic
Um,
experience that was involved there, and your journey through that. I bet you there's a lot to flesh out in there if we wanted to do that at a future time.
yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I think this is like as far as like a good introduction to
To
us
us.
and like what we're like where we became friends and how it kind of informed us going forward. I feel like it's this is a pretty good
Yeah.
introduction.
Yeah. Well, that was really fun, man. I am excited about that. Um, let's if we're thinking about what to call a podcast, if we take the tone of this, I think we need to incorporate just I don't know, I'm relationships, the healing nature of nature, yeah, growth, journey, something about journey, relationships,
Yeah.
nature, I think would be cool.
We'll
So,
come up with something.
okay.
It'll find us.
Anyway, man. Anything else you want to say or anything?
No, just thanks, man. Like this is gonna be cool.
Yeah, love you to death, buddy.
Yeah, love you
How
too,
often
man.
you want to get together? I
I mean, I think if we could figure,
I
I don't
think
know.
every week might get cumbersome, but I think I could do every other week or at least once a month for sure.
Yeah, I say let's shoot for every other week. That's kind of what I
Okay.
was thinking too. I was thinking once a week would be kind of tricky.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, man. Well,
Yeah,
love you, buddy. Hope you have a good rest of your day. And yeah, look forward to chatting with you again, man.
likewise, man. Love you, Carl. We'll see you,
Okay,
man.
buddy. Talk
Bye.
to you later, man.